of you watching today. Young and minded folk like myself, curious minded I assume, for today we are looking at a very curious case. Today we're looking at Netflix and the conflict they are having with Sherlock Holmes copyright. So interesting, it's so... sorry. I cannot stop myself with excitement when I find a case like this. For when you're looking at it, you might think this is a straightforward affair. Oh no, never a straightforward affair with me. Ha ha ha. Today, it will be a most ridiculous case.
You might be asking yourself, why the little flair in the opening? Why this strange way of introducing a video? Well, because today we're talking about a very illustrious detective and I thought it was deserved to have a little bit of flair in the beginning because, of course, Sherlock Holmes deserves the cred that he gets. He's a pretty fun guy. He's an interesting character to use constantly, and that's why we constantly see him being used by several different production companies, books, anime, very weird gay anime, and other interesting things, as I say. And that's how I came to see this news, and my nose peaked when I was sniffing that this was not going to be the usual type of story. Because today we're talking about how the Conan Doyle estate is suing Netflix over the coming movie Enola Holmes because the state is claiming that the movie is infringing in the last 10 books by Doyle that came out around 1923 and 1927. Now, Netflix is not the only one getting the brunt of the blame thrown at them by the Doyle estate. The production company, the publishing company that published the books of Enola Holmes mystery series, and the author herself are all getting a lawsuit from the state. Wait a minute. For those that don't know, Sherlock Holmes is technically public domain, for the most part. And for the most part is the important thing here. Because since the Doyle estate kept 10 books from Sherlock Holmes, they're able to sue people over them using those stories. I thought to myself when I learned that was the case, since there might be suing them about the things that are not public domain, that maybe Enola Holmes was a character that showed up in the later stories in 1923 and 1927, and maybe that would be something that would make sense. But you know me by now, if it was to make sense, I would be not making this video in any way. What actually happened here is that Enola Holmes is completely extra fictional to the Sherlock Holmes series. She was created by the author of the Enola Holmes mysteries and is completely separated from the both public domain and the copyrighted Sherlock Holmes. So that's not what the copyright is actually about. That's not the issue. Can you guess what possible reason, what possible argument is being made by the Doyle estate for why this should be infringing this copyright? I'm gonna tell you this right now. Whatever possible reasonable explanation has gone through your head is completely incorrect. What actually happened is just kind of stupid. The Doyle estate, the claim that they're trying to pull here is that the difference between the public domain stories and the copyrighted ones is emotions. Emotions. If that doesn't make any sense, it's because it doesn't. I would love them to have done this to the judge that told them that they couldn't keep the rights for the majority of the Doyle stories. And you want to know why? It's because the judge that made that decision was a goddamn savage and would have told them to fuck off if these were their actual claims. So I'm gonna give you a few examples of what was said about Sherlock Holmes and why he became a public domain character, and then you will see how appealing to emotions might have not been a great case by the Doyle estate, which I'm sure they were not happy about his reasonings because he was just a cold murderer with his words, was that Sherlock Holmes was not a complex character, and that his attributes and backgrounds had been developed outside of the Doyle work. Essentially claiming that the Sherlock that we know of, the Sherlock that is used most of the times, is not the private hold of the copyrighted Doyle estate. Those two Sherlocks are essentially different people. And if you don't think that's savage enough, well, the next line is where it brought a smile to my face. Because the judge just said, to deny copyright on the whole Sherlock Holmes character would be tantamount to giving the famous detective multiple personalities, and that's... whew! That is the nicest way that this man could have told the Doyle estate to please kindly go fuck yourself. I don't care about your copyright, you're full of shit. And I would love them to go back to the same judge and be like, but sir, we want our copyright money for free, so we're saying that that movie is breaking copyright because Sherlock Holmes has too many emotions.
But it makes no sense.
Exactly. It makes no sense.
Interesting take is all I'm gonna say. So let's give the Doyle estate a chance. Let's give them a possibility that maybe what they're trying to say is not idiotic, it's not ridiculous, it maybe makes some sense in some possible way. But I'm just gonna give you a hint right now, it gets dumber. Now, the next thing I'm gonna read out to you is gonna sound a little bit sad because it is about some tragic events in the Doyle life, but it's not a good argument for the court of law. In World War I, Conan Doyle lost his eldest son. 4 months later, he lost his brother. When Conan Doyle came back to Holmes in the copyrighted stories between 1923 and 1927, how convenient, it was no longer enough that the Holmes character was the most brilliant, rational, and analytical mind. Holmes needed to be human, and the character needed to develop human connection and empathy. Yeah, that context doesn't make it much better, because essentially this is their main claim in the whole thing. The new Holmes was much more human. He had emotions. He was human, and apparently he wasn't before. And I did read through most of the claims, and a lot of them were logical fallacies, just like that one. A lot of them were just appeals to emotions, trying to manipulate whoever listens to feel bad and give them the case, because Doyle's life was tragic, but that doesn't make your case stronger, sir. It just doesn't add anything to the case of copyright. When reading the claims, when looking at them, I thought to myself, what if somebody was to just find a few examples of the previous work before 1923 to 1927, where Sherlock Holmes was shown to be human and have empathy and any emotion? Wouldn't that be the case that your points do not make any sense and therefore fall under public domain? That would make sense to me. I think that is logical.
But wait! There's more!
In their own claims, they use only 2 examples of Sherlock Holmes being unemotional and cold to the people that he is supposed to like. Out of a shit ton of stories, they only pull 2 examples of that. That is very interesting, very grasping at straws, I would say. And then when they're trying to prove that he's more emotional, more warm, more human, in the new ones, there just shows pretty normal examples of just he's smiling, he's being eager, he's being delighted. Interesting how basically going through a shit ton of novels would allow you to pull any sort of example to prove your point, especially out of context. It wouldn't be that difficult, I am assuming, to just go into one of the first ever Sherlock Holmes books and just find examples to prove that indeed Sherlock Holmes was not a cyborg without human emotions and did have indeed human connections, because he's a human and human connections do not have to be, warm. They can just be negative. They can be cold. They can be analytical. He is a human. Therefore, human connections. Here are some quotes that I'm sure if the lawyers of the Doyle estate are reading, I'm sure they were like, nah, he was just pretending though. It's just a prank, bro. Don't worry about it. So let's start with the first one. Sherlock. Never mind, said he, chuckling to himself. Ha ha! He, Sherlock cried, clapping his hands and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted at the idea of sharing his rooms with me. He, Sherlock, always apologized to me for putting me to this inconvenience. These were just a few examples I found in one book, only reading the first few chapters. I would say, arguably, that it's fairly easy to convince somebody reading this to read these lines as Sherlock having emotions, being human, and having some sort of empathy. It's almost like he apologized for putting somebody through an inconvenience. Wouldn't that necessitate him to have some sort of empathy? How curious that is the case. I don't know about that, Chief. That seems like you're not making a good case. It seems like you're only making these claims to go outside of court, to not go for the entire lawsuit, to make money out of off-court settlement. And why am I saying this with such certainty? That's exactly what the Doyle estate want. Why would I claim to say that they don't really want a lawsuit? That's not what they want. They just want off-court money. It's not like there is a previous example of them doing pretty much the exact same thing with a different movie with Holmes in the title. Oh wait, that happened back in 2015. Only 1 year after it went to public domain. I wonder if they were still pissy about the judge being a savage. I'm sure there was nothing to do with anything. Now, essentially what the Doyle estate did with the same case was make up some bullshit reason to claim that their rights were being infringed in some way, then be like going to the other parties being lawsuit and going, hey, I know you don't want to spend this money in a very expensive lawsuit with both gigantic companies. How about we shake hands, agree to both fuck off, you give us some money and some recognition, and we're all gooch. We're all good. You can leave. Allegedly, because the Doyle estate seems fairly happy to throw lawsuits at everybody, and me not having millions of dollars like the people that publish books and are successful in the media have, they probably would go all the way in a lawsuit with me. So let's just say that this is my idea of what possibly happened in my mind. I believe that is fairly close to possibly what happened in reality. For real, it's what happened, in my opinion, allegedly. How should I put this? The Doyle estate clearly has a motive so transparent that even a Scotland Yard official can sue through it. And the Doyle estate, if you don't know where the quote is from, it's from the first story where Sherlock Holmes shows emotions and has human connections. So if you're wondering what your motive is, sir, it's money. Obviously, it's money. It's sweet, easy cash, if you couldn't guess. Because clearly the lawyers that drafted your fucking claims don't know what they're doing by having a logical fallacy in their main claim itself. How were you able to send this to court without feeling a wave of embarrassment by those being your strongest claims? Did you not have a small sense of dignity and maybe realize maybe we shouldn't do this? That's just kind of embarrassing. I'm sorry. It's not a good claim. I read it, and I'm not a lawyer, and it's not good. So if a lawyer reads this, I'm sure they were gonna have a good day laughing at you. The only claims I could possibly see kinda sticking, kinda having an argument in court, maybe, is the claims towards the offer of the Enola Holmes mysteries, because they were written before the public domain rights to Sherlock Holmes were available for everybody. But it's not like they're probably gonna go all the way anyways, they're just gonna get it settled out of court, so it doesn't really matter. Now, I also did my research on precedents of copyright law and what fell under fair use. And wouldn't you know, I was able to find 2 examples that could be argued towards the defendants in ways that to tell the state to just kindly fuck themselves and go away. Politely, of course. If this is not a defamation of character, this is just a parody. This is just jokes. Don't worry about it. It's just my opinion, allegedly. Don't sue me, please. Thank you. Goodbye. They just have to claim that the books and the movie were created by using the public domain books as a biographical anchor. Therefore, the defendant, the person that wrote the book and made the movie, put their own twist on the original material. And since the original material is technically in public domain now, you could argue that by adding emotions to Sherlock Holmes, he is distinct from the public domain one, but also the copyrighted one. And that's a precedent set in court. I didn't argue it very well, but I'm sure a lawyer would do a much better job than I am. Also, what they can do that is probably much easier than the previous argument is just have the court find that the work that they have is different enough from the original to distinct itself in a way that is fair use. And that would be a lot easier, because they just have to go, she went to the public domain one and made her own story. And that's all they have to do. I really believe it wouldn't be that hard to defeat the people that made the claim, since their main argument is a logical fallacy, and their claims are arguing that Sherlock Holmes before 1923 wasn't human, did not have any empathy, and did not have any human emotions. If he even once in the books was described as slightly tired, guess what? That's an emotion, and therefore makes him human. What are you talking about?
You thought I was gone forever? Oh, no, I would never leave you. Today, we learned something great. People that are still holding the smidges of copyright, they can wave that flag for easy money. They'll try their best to get money, and they will most likely get it because nobody wants to get sued. Most likely not me either. Please do not sue me. All I said was allegedly. Please do not sue me, okay? Alright, so what did we learn today? I truly do not know!